so nervous for that last night, but it ended up going well. And, when you can kind of wrangle together a bunch of 5 and 6 year olds and have a successful practice, it's a good thing. So excited for the season. So I graduated from the University of Michigan, go blue, went to Northwestern for my MBA. And yes, that means I am a avid Michigan and Boston sports fan. I know it's not the best combination, but hopefully you don't hold it too hard against me. In terms of kind of more on the professional side, I've led and grown companies in all sectors of education, whether that's K-12, whether that's kind of adult workforce training, and of course higher ed. And I've also been an entrepreneur, so started my own company back in 2012, and that group really focused on bringing U.S. education programs to upskill employees in Latin America. Outside of my work here at the NSLS, I'm a family man first and foremost, but I enjoy dabbling and failing at golf. That's something I enjoy, but all good. All right, so what have I been doing here? So for the last year and a half, I've been focused on quite a bit internally here at the NSLS, right? Like learning our operation and also building our culture, right? And for those who don't know, we were just rated as a great place to work. So culture's been our focus. And the reason for that has been very intentional. If we're going to be building leaders across the country and across the world, we need to walk the walk internally. But at the same time, I've been having conversations with university advisors, e-board members, student presidents, student members, and employers, right? And it's been tremendous in terms of like the learning opportunities, in terms of like what's gone right, what are things that we can improve. Overall, this process has been just super important. I mean, ultimately, the goal here at the NSLS has always been focused on how do we make leadership radically accessible for all, right? Like, if you really think about it, 25 years ago, our founder, Gary Turek, who I know many of you have spoken with and many of you have actually never heard from. But Gary started this all by doing speeches at universities around the country, right? And his goal was on helping students on their academic and leadership journey. However, he went through the same process, right? Like he started talking to students and advisors, and he realized like they needed something more to really kind of, drive that leadership impact. And that's how the NSLS was really started, right? Like, and I would say I've gone through a similar process in terms of being able to speak with our advisors and student members. And I would say we're really ready for our next evolution as an organization. I'm excited to share some of that vision with you today, okay? And that's my goal, really, right? Like my goal is to be transparent with you all, right? And I'm committed to doing that, as I really, really, really appreciate the input, the feedback, because I know how all committed you are to your chapters. And the last thing I want is for there to be any surprises. So here's the overarching viewpoint, right, that occurred from all of these conversations that occurred over the last, 16 months. COVID really changed things in a way that feels relatively permanent going forward, right? So the first is, there's a focus now on equating your work to your passion, right? Like that's important, right? People realize like, listen, I want to have passion around what it is that I do. I want to really believe in the mission of wherever it is that I'm working. That is really crucial. The second part is that COVID kind of made things a little bit lonely, right? Like, and I think our members are really craving that connection. And lastly, and where I'm going to spend more time on this talk, is that everyone needs to really embrace change for like the long term. So as we move forward towards helping our students be more successful in this kind of constantly changing environment, they need to leverage not only like their leadership skills, but they got to start employing more of a growth mindset. See, a growth mindset is the underpinning foundation for any successful leader, right? So like, and I think the better way for me to explain it is kind of giving the counterpoint of a fixed mindset, right? So a fixed mindset is like when you're operating from fear, right? Like you're unwilling to change, you're a little dug in, right? A growth mindset is more a never-ending focus, right? Being open and vulnerable to constantly learn, right? Like growth mindset is about constantly upskilling and putting yourself in a position to learn. It's about, having that humility to say, I don't need to be the smartest person in the room. Like I can be successful by learning and empowering others. And I guess kind of continue to, instead of talking about the definition, let me give you a couple examples that from my own experience that illustrate a little bit better, right? And frankly, gives you all a chance to get to know me a little bit better. So when I've kind of looked at growth mindset, I've always kind of viewed myself as being a bit resourceful, right? And really employing that growth mindset. But it allowed me to learn from others, but also empower others. So I'll give a couple examples, right? So back when I was at Michigan, I dabbled with the idea of being a computer engineer, right? So I'm like, okay, this is where the world is heading. Let me try to get ahead of it. Let me start taking some coding classes. It was terrible, right? Like, I took HTML, I took C++, no idea what I was doing. However, earlier on in the year, I had applied and I got an internship with a company in Boston, right? Like actually a bank in Boston to do like financial engineering and build C++ code around it. And so I still had the commitment to do the internship. So over the summer, go back to Boston, right? I was in Ann Arbor for school, go back to Boston, go into this internship experience. And I remember the first day I got there and I saw these experienced coders, right? And they just had every book you could imagine related to coding. And I'm like looking at my desk, I got nothing. So I go over to the Harvard Coop bookstore, right? And if anyone's ever been to this bookstore, I mean, it's kind of like a Harry Potter-esque, like just gigantic bookstore. And there were books related to all different versions of coding. And there was this book, C++ for Dummies, right? Pull it out, take it. That saved me for the summer, right? I mean, I was able to kind of learn and pick it up. And I just kind of went into that with an understanding that, like, listen, I don't know everything here. Let me try to figure it out. Let me try to pick it up, and ended up working out pretty well. Another example was the first time I was a manager, right? So the first time I was a manager, I actually felt like I had to be the smartest person in the room, right? Which I think is kind of the traditional mistake most leaders make for the first time, is like, if I got to lead this group, I got to be the smartest person in the room and I got to lead them and figure out the strategy and all that. And I took all this time, right, to like put together this amazing sales strategy, this business development plan. And I just remember falling on deaf ears. Like there was like crickets in the room. And the team ultimately ended up doing some of that strategy. We had some decent results. But after that, I really went into it with more of a mindset of like, let me get the group together on this. Let's figure this out together. We got smart people on this team. Let's figure out the strategy. Let me empower them to really be a part of the conversation. And we had such better results after that. Even today as a CEO, right? Like I don't have all the answers, right? Like what my focus is can we have clarity around our goals, put ourselves in a position to try and learn from our mistakes and just continue to get better along the way. Like employing a growth mindset is truly what being a leader is about, right? It allows you to say, hey, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I can work with, I can learn from others, get to the same goal versus feeling like I got to do it on my own. And the second you make that change, you become more open, more humble, and definitely more successful as a leader. But you got to practice it, right? You got to employ it. You got to learn from it. It needs to be a long-term habit. Okay. And so while I've been having conversations with students, I've also been talking to employers. And listen, I know not every chapter is focused on career success, but our data from member surveys shows that career planning and success is massively important to our student members across the board. So I at least got to ensure we're aware of what's going on at the macro level. And for my conversations, right, with employers, they're looking for the next wave of leaders. And we all know this, right? Like, but what they want is the next wave of leaders that have that growth mindset. Like leadership is turning over in the next decade in all respects, regardless if you're talking about big corporate, academia, nonprofit, or even the entrepreneurial space, right? Like the opportunities to fill those ranks and drive real change is coming fast. I mean, technology is moving at a lightning pace, right? AI, socioeconomics are shifting. The economy is like in constant flux. So what's going to be necessary for our members to achieve that success in spite of all of this is a habit around leadership. How do they continue to learn, grow, and empower others to make that positive impact? Because it's got to become a habit. Some of you have heard me say this before. You can't just watch a Simon Sinek video or TikTok video and say, hey, I'm a leader now, right? Like it needs to be built over time. And all respect to Simon Sinek, I think he's brilliant, right? But I think you get the point. So to really prepare our NSLS members, we got to make sure that we give them that we help them build that growth mindset as a habit, right? Connect the two, growth mindset, habit, put it together. But we got to give them the environment to practice that growth mindset and to be vulnerable and to be open, which is why we are going to be building and launching a community learning platform. Okay. So let me explain what that means. When done correctly, communities are immensely powerful forms of education, right? Communities are real-time, they're accountable, they drive inspiration and definitely drive engagement, right? But they got to be built around a purpose. So our most successful chapters, when we look nationwide, when we look worldwide, our most successful chapters are those that have built a community around their chapter that is inviting, it's engaging, and we've learned from them, right? And our goal is to help enable this experience for all of our chapters, right? And something they can continue to benefit from, meaning our members, long after they've left the campus. That's our goal. So what we know, though, is that student members are asking to be part of that conversation, and they want to do it from a global perspective, right? Like, how do we help them learn, grow, and transform together? Okay. So what we're doing is we're building, I would say, a cutting edge, mobile first community learning platform that'll give student members optional access to a global network of connected leaders. So for those who don't know, we've actually launched our first few chapters in Latin America, and our goal is to really help facilitate that connection between our members across the country and across the world, right? Like, that's really the vision we see. Like, there's just tremendous potential in terms of connecting student members, to one another around interest areas, right? But also potentially with alumni. So we're actually working on a separate community space for our chapter advisors, our student e-board members, to interact and connect with one another. The more we're talking to each other, right, the more we're facilitating true connection and helping each other. And honestly, it's this level of engagement that's going to allow our student members to kind of build this growth mindset into a habit for the long term. That's the goal. That's the focus. We're really supporting them over the next several years as things are shifting. It's got to be that habit built around growth mindset. That's really where that leadership is going to come into play. So additionally, what we're also going to see through the community learning platform is that student members are going to have access to new leadership learning experiences. There's going to be career development programming, but understand that this entire offering is optional, okay? Our first priority is continuing to engage with students through our core program, right? Which is called Foundations of Leadership Program, right? So some of you might know it as FOL, right? Because when we run that effectively, when FOL is run effectively, either in person or online, like many of our chapters do, it's the best starting point, right? And it's where we all got to start. But we've listened to our members, right? And we know they want more. And our next step in that journey is going to be to offer them that kind of community-focused experience that'll allow them to continue their leadership if they elect to do so. Okay. So now I know there's going to be questions related to what are the details around this community learning platform? When is this happening? Does my chapter get access? Will there be additional cost? Will Foundations of Leadership be changing? Here's what I'd like to say is, for now, all I'd like to say for now is just that we're listening to our members and advisors, right? We know we need to be prepared for the future. That said, I never want there to be a surprise for our university partners and e-board members. So in about 6 weeks, I'm going to be hosting another live stream to share all the details of this community learning platform, right? So we're even going to be launching a private SharePoint site that our chapter advisors, leaders, you're going to have access to. You can see the updates and the direction we're going and give us feedback, okay? Like, and then in addition to that, we're also going to have some details related to our fall summit, right? So all of it's going to be kind of connected together in kind of one communication. Ultimately, I'm personally committed to transparency, and I want you all along for the ride, okay? But overall, what today was just about me to finally introduce myself to you all and open up some dialogue. And secondly, I hope you walk away with the vision of where the NSLS is going. And the best way to summarize it is in 3 points, right? So the first is that we're in a challenging environment, a dynamic environment, and that requires leaders to employ a growth mindset. The second is that growth mindset is the framework that allows us to turn leadership into a long-term habit, right? Combine the growth mindset, combine the habit, put that together, right? Like, that's how we got to support our members going forward. And lastly, the way we plan to foster this is in conjunction with our chapters is employing a community learning framework, right? That allows our members to learn, grow, and transform together as they move along in their leadership journey, okay? So until we speak again, right, at the next live stream, here's what I'd like to ask, okay? If you're an advisor or a student e-board member, right, reach out to your chapter success manager, right? Provide some feedback on this, but also ask yourself, does our chapter have the type of community that engages someone with this growth mindset, right? Secondly, if you're a student, start employing the growth mindset, right? Like reach out to someone in your chapter and connect with them. Okay, sound fair? All right, so I look forward to seeing you all in the next live stream. And if we have them, let's now open it up to a few questions. And actually, let me pull up where the questions are. Okay, got a few questions here, and we'll take about 15 to 20 minutes to answer any questions that we can. So I've got the first one here. We've got Jenna from LinkedIn asks, how can I improve my NSLS chapter as an e-board member? Okay, Jenna, great question. So in terms of improving your chapter as an e-board member, what you can do is you can start to foster that community, right? So like, are you being proactive with the new members that join, right? Are you providing them with an environment where they can feel like this is a safe space for me to grow my leadership skills, right? Like the whole focus going forward is to really enable our members, but through a community, right? So like, how can you provide connections for them within the chapter, but with yourself, right? That's going to be really important is, that we continue to kind of foster that community element, because that's really going to help members feel like they're part of something that's going to support them for the long term. It's a really good question. Okay, we've got the next one. We've got Kirsten from YouTube. All right, so what role will chapter leaders play in this new community, and how does this change the chapter leader role for chapters? Hugely important question. Okay, so what we're seeing, right, is that the current experience that chapters continue to play, for that's not going to change, right? We want that to stay consistent. That works really well, right? Like if chapter leaders are proactively engaging members as part of that induction experience and continue to do what they're doing, that's great, right? Continue to post induction, right? So like once they complete induction, they're now going to have access to this community, global community, that's going to provide them with all kinds of new opportunities to connect with folks around the world, around the country, as well as build their leadership skills and even some career programming concepts, right? So that's what we're thinking there. So again, just to reiterate, we don't want the role for chapter leaders to change. And in terms of in the new community, we're not sure yet, right? Like we're happy to have discussions with chapter leaders to see, do you want to play a part in the new community? We're going to have facilitators. We're going to have a lot of folks that can kind of help members along, but we're also open to having those discussions with chapter leaders. Okay, cool. So Ali from Facebook, in order to globally connect members or even just nationally connect, technology plays a huge part. What technology platform is being built or considered, and what kind of a user experience will this provide? So what technological platform? So we have, one of, I would say, the assets of the NSLS that we have is we have a tremendous technology team led by our CIO, Sean Anderson. And his group just builds unbelievable technology, right? And so we are building a proprietary version of a platform that allows kind of this community to live and breathe, and it's going to have a lot of great engaging activities. And most importantly, it is mobile first, like more like challenges, hackathons, daily feeds, posts, all those types of things. So we're going to have all of that contained within this, within this platform. I don't want to dive into too much detail. I probably went into too much there. We're ironing more of that out. And then on the next live stream, we'll go into much greater detail at that point. Okay, so we got a lot of questions here. This is great. All right, let me take a quick sip of water because we got a lot here. Okay, Colin from LinkedIn asks, are we having national conferences that bring our chapter leaders and members together? Okay, another good question. So the answer is yes. And so the reason I'm hesitating on that. So in the past, right, the NSLS has done regional conferences leading up to a national conference, right? And COVID changed all that, right, obviously. And just this past year, we did our first national conference in quite some time. And that was in Jersey City. And so we just did it this past year. I think it went really well, just phenomenal engagement. A lot of excitement came out of that. So as we move forward here, we're considering a few different options and would love some feedback on this too. But this year, we're looking at maybe doing a blend of a potential hybrid virtual conference, so folks around the country can join. But we will be getting back to some level of a regional and national in-person conference. I don't know if we'll be doing it this year because we're so focused on launching this community. And a key part for us is that our goal ultimately is to make our programs accessible for students, right? So the virtual conference we're thinking about this year is to provide that accessibility, right? And then going into the next year, we'll look at potentially bringing back some in-person conferences, whether that be regional or national. Okay. YB from Ivy Tech Community College from Facebook asks, are there going to be more classes we can take for credit outside of advanced and executive courses? Okay, so for those who don't know, we do have programs outside of the FOL program called A&E, right? Advanced and Executive, as YB from Ivy Tech shares. And those are available for credit. And you can actually take them without having to go for credit as well, right? So we have a couple options there. So at this point, we do not have more programs outside of advanced and executive that will count for college credit. That doesn't mean we won't in the future. But right now, our focus is less about more classes and more about leadership learning experiences, right? So like, how do we, because ultimately what our goal here is, right, is to, as I mentioned before, how do we turn leadership into more of a long-term habit, right? And classes can be helpful, but to really drive that going forward, we need to start building leadership experiences where people can practice leadership, right? Like, you don't want to wait until your first job to start practicing leadership, right? Or until you're 5 years into your career, because most companies actually wait for a number of years before you start getting that development. No, we want to start that right now, right? So we want to give you those experiences, want to give you those opportunities to network, to mentor, to do all of those things as soon as possible. So I think the next direction is going to be more around, you know, kind of these leadership learning experiences and less about kind of the rote academic classes, but we have those too, right? So those are still there. Okay, from Amy, will this community be only for active NSLS members? It's a great question. So what we're planning to start with is, yes, only active NSLS members. We're considering other avenues as well, because we have a huge alumni group, right? And there's so much value in being able to connect our active current NSLS members with our alumni NSLS members. There's career opportunities, there's growth opportunities, there's just so much potential there. But we want to make sure we're doing it in a very thoughtful approach, right? So we're going to take it one step at a time. I'll share more details in the next live stream about exactly that rollout. But yeah, so at least right now, it'll definitely be kind of the active NSLS members. So William from LinkedIn asks, will the NSLS have more events for leadership, networking, and job fairs? So leadership and networking, absolutely. Job fairs, not sure, right? So let me put it this way, right? And this is just my viewpoint, right? Our team has sometimes disagreed with me on this, and we can all talk about it, right? But so when you look at like job fairs or you look at like job boards, right? Like the supply of jobs is relatively the same, regardless if it's coming through a job board, a job fair, any of those. I think what we can do, right, to kind of make you more successful is not necessarily taking that same supply and offering it up, because you can find that anywhere. I think the way we can really support is, how do you kill it at the job fair, right? Like, how do you go into that with a blueprint that says, okay, here's a job fair, right? What's the research I want to do prior to the job fair? Who are the companies that are going to be there? How can I review their social feeds to get a sense of what that company cares about, their mission statement, and their values? When I interact with someone at the job fair, what does that look like, right? Like, what's the best practice I can do to really maximize my opportunity at that job fair? So our focus is more about providing those blueprints, right? So that's more our focus there. And actually, so just to kind of relate it to this, we do have an internship live stream tomorrow. That's going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern, live on social. So, you know, kind of related to this, take advantage of it, right? So that internship live stream is tomorrow night, 7 p.m. So you can find it on any of our socials. All right. Stephanie Woods from YouTube. Do you believe in your viewpoint that community involvement will help increase morality and NSLS? Why or why not? Morality. I'm not sure about morality, and I want to make sure I'm answering this question correctly, or at least taking a stab at it. I think what community will do is that it empowers everybody, I think, to get more involved, right? And I think that's kind of the key part we're trying to solve with community is what community allows us to do is it allows us to be more real time, right? More aware of what's going on versus like, okay, something happens, then we have to create some content and then we have to roll out the content and then offer it in a new program format. Versus with a live, vibrant community, we can be more agile to respond to what's going on. So I guess my answer to your question, Stephanie, is I think morality, right? I mean, there's very clear morals that are out there, right? But in terms of kind of how the NSLS can support that, I think the best thing we can do is more be that facilitation engine for more real time access to what's going on in the world, right? And how do we as leaders address that, right? We might not all agree with it. We're all going to be aware of it, and we can take our own personal leadership styles to kind of impact that in a positive way going forward. Okay, we have a question from Kabake from YouTube. My apologies if I mispronounced that. How can one evaluate growth in a community? Okay, so I think what you're referring to is individually, how can I evaluate growth for myself in a community? That's a great question. So I think, and the way I would put it is this way, to go back to an example for myself, right? And I think ultimately, right? So like, for example, like what I do as it comes to my own leadership development, I'm a big fan of mentorship. And if anyone's heard if any of you have heard my induction speeches before, you might have heard this before. But for me, mentorship is really important, right? And the way I look at it is in two ways, right? The first is that every month I want to make sure that I'm mentoring with someone that I can learn from. And at the same time, I also want to make sure that I'm mentoring someone that can learn from me. I always believe in paying it forward. But the reason I do that is because once a month, I go through this experience, right? And if I do this once a month, every single month, my leadership skills continue to grow. They have no choice but to continue to grow. So when I look at that, that to me is growth, right? That's not something tangible I can put into place. But as I look at my day-to-day job, right? As I look at how I'm being a leader in the community, being a leader in my personal relationships, I am learning so much from that mentorship, both being mentored and mentoring someone else, that's how I see that growth, right? So when we're looking at growth in this community, what are those experiences that we can provide that allow you to turn that leadership skill set into a habit, right? And then how you continue to grow from that. So I don't want to say it's subjective, but at the same time, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And with communities, you're going to see that there's a lot of accountability there. There's a lot of inspiration there. There's going to be an opportunity to learn from folks who've done some great work that you're going to be able to learn from. Okay, Crystal Bingle from YouTube. Love the idea of the new platform connecting students around the globe based on interest. How will this be integrated into the core curriculum, if at all? Great question. So I don't want to go into too much because this is still a little bit of a moving target. We are planning on making some updates to the Foundations of Leadership program, leveraging this community, okay? This community learning platform, right? Which means in some cases, or what we're probably looking at is just leveraging the technology to allow FOL to have more of that interactivity within the chapter, right? So within the chapter, students and members can connect with each other faster, quicker, easier. I don't think we're going to open it up to the global network yet. We want to really reserve that for students that have been inducted and have kind of been involved in the process, right? So I do see it involved in the core curriculum, but more from a technology perspective. Okay, now we've got a couple more minutes here. Angie Valadares, again, apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, from YouTube. With community involvement, how's the NSLS furthering DE&I and accessibility options for new members? Fantastic question, Angie, right? So DE&I is a very big part of our programming, right? In terms of kind of how we look at supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility options for our new members. So it's something that we are absolutely considering and developing as part of our rollout. So I can't really go into the details yet. I'll save some of that for the live stream, the next live stream. But I do want you to know that DE&I is a massive portion of our development going forward. Okay, I'm going to take one more question. I've got Nadisha Williamson here from YouTube. How do we actively change our mindset? What are the necessary steps? Oof, that's a good question, right? So, how do we actively change from a growth mindset, right? I think the best way to do it is to just go into any situation being more open, right? And really kind of telling yourself, I don't need to be the smartest person in the room, right? Like I can leverage my resourcefulness to really kind of tackle any challenge, right? Like I can go into whether it's a work challenge, whether it's a personal challenge, whether it's, a school challenge or a class challenge, right? Like you're going to figure it out, but you can do that by learning from others and empowering others. It's that single shift from I got to know everything to I'm going to learn everything, right? And if you start to do that, your blood pressure level calms down a little bit, right? The anxiety drops down a bit, and you can just go into it with a different mindset that is more productive, I would say, and will lead you to more success. And also, I want to share when you actually ask what are the necessary steps in our next or within the community learning platform. I know I shouldn't share this. We are going to have programs specifically tied to growth mindset, right? So things that that will teach you, and what are some of the tools and resources you can use to start employing that. Okay. Um, that's pretty much, I think, we've kind of gotten to the end of our time. I just want to say appreciate everyone joining today. And I'm really excited to now, what I would say is continue the discussion going forward, right? So my hope is that we get to do these live streams on a more regular basis. I look forward to hearing from feedback from advisors, student members, student presidents. You can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn, if you want to kind of reach out directly. I'm on Twitter as well. And, you can reach out to me there. But really excited to now be communicating more directly with our NSLS community, and just absolutely excited for the future and look forward to seeing you on the next one.